So in this video we're going to be taking a look at finishing up our tertiary details by taking alpha maps and turning that into information that we can use for our brushes so we can get some very ornate kind of detail that's low level. It doesn't push the surface up or down a whole lot, but it can add a whole lot of detail to the final design. So I'm going to hop over to Photoshop and I'll take a look at two different files that we have here. The first one should be right here. Is just something I found off the internet, and I don't own the rights to this image. I'm just using this as demonstration purposes, where you could go out onto the internet, you could find some black and white imagery, and you could potentially turn this into alpha data for Zbrush, so you can make some different cool kind of looking stamps. So what I did, the image was actually kind of more of a rectangular format, and it was very vertical. And all I did for that was I made my background color white that you see here, and went to image, and then went to canvas size, and then I made the width and the height the same size for this image here. So if you add that, if you have a white background and you make the background white, it'll just make the canvas larger and fill that up. And I can pull this in and I'll show you what that looks like. That'll be a nice image that's coming in through here like this. If I didn't have it quite like that, if I had it to where the image was, let's see, more like this, if I go and crop it, and this looked more kind of like the spacing of what I had found from the internet. If I pull that on there, I was getting some issues with the brush not showing all the detail and doing this weird kind of circular kind of thing. So what I found about that was just going to fill up the canvas size. So just taking this number, pasting it like that, and the background was white. So just save that out. I saved it out as a flattened Photoshop file. You can use a BMP, but maybe that becomes a little bit more difficult. I believe you can use a JPEG too. But I just found saving out a .psd file works really well. Now, if you saw on the design that I have inside of Zbrush, this is more of this like vertical column that we have here, and it's thinner in through here. So if I just laid out that alpha the way that it was currently in Photoshop, like this, it didn't quite fit. So I just took this and I transformed it. So that's pretty easy to do. If I just take a marquee tool, tap M, or you can click right through here like this. If we just drag a marquee around this like this here and hit Control T to transform, and I pull this in, and I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt. It might be different on an earlier version. I know they changed some of the controls for that, but this will scale right in the middle like this, and I just kind of scaled it down roughly in this area like that, and then I saved that out as a alternate version. I hit escape for that. So I saved this out. Once I did that change, I saved this as a version 2 so I could have both of them. And then I'm going to go to ZBrush and show you real quick this alpha area and importing in that map. So if we go to import, we can go to the very first one and we can say open, and I'll show you on a piece. Let's just make a plain 3D, and if I click here and click on plain 3D, that's a primitive. So I'm going to say make polymesh 3D like this, and I might have to rotate it to kind of find it. If I turn on the polyframe, you can see how much geometry we have for this. If I drag this out, it's not going to be very compelling. We just don't have enough geometry. So I'm going to use subdivision levels on this. So I'll hit divide, and I'll divide it up. Let's go about 6 times. Now if I click and drag out, you can see what we're getting. So I'm going to turn off the frame so we can see everything here. I'm going to take the alpha palette and I'm going to click this and then drag it over so we can kind of take a look at this. So right now it's on Z add, and if I click and drag out, you can see it's going to add in the white area like that and push out. Now the intensity is how far out it pushes. So if we do a really low level like this, we're going to get something that looks like that. And that's pretty nice. The other thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the alpha and I'm going to go to modify. And if we take this mid value and turn it all the way up to 100, And if we click and drag out, you can see we're going to get rid of this square kind of format, and it's just going to drag out like what we see here. And so that's going to push back within there. Now if we do a Z sub and then click and drag up like that, it'll go this direction for us. That's actually opposite of what the image looks like. I know that might be a little bit confusing, but we can flip this in the horizontal right here like that, and now just click and drag up, and you can see we're getting the pattern that we were looking for before. Now with this drag rectangle, you can click and drag up, and you can rotate the image around so you can get really nice placement on there. Okay, so depending on what you want, I probably want to push that thing in, and then I want to flip this, so this is what I would want for that. Now if you've got this set up, I did this on a standard brush, and I took the focal shift, and the focal shift is set to -100. So take a look here. If we have this on 0, it kind of fades out like that. You definitely don't want that behavior, so we'll take the focal shift, drag it down to -100, and then we get a very clean pull for that image that you see there like that. Now we can go to brush, and we can save that out, and we can give it a name, and you could call this like dragon brush, and then you're kind of set for that, right? If I want to pull the other one in, I'm going to say import, and I'll pull in the second version like this, hit open, and then click and drag up. And we may have to, because we import a new alpha in, go to set up these values again. So I'll take this mid value, put it to 100, and I can just click and drag up just like this. And then if I want this alternate version, then I would go and say brush and say save as, and then I would just give it like a version 2 or something. So that's all that was done on this for this part of the pillar for dragging these things out. Again, to control the depth on there, you're going to have to just take the Z add, and you can crank it up or crank it down depending if you want it to be very light or if you want it to be a little bit heavier. Now it did push all the way through the model on that. If you want that behavior, that's fine. But if not, you would have to turn on this back face mask, and you can see that I could just click and then drag out, and I could just drag it on this front part, and it shouldn't push back through on the back. So something else to kind of keep in mind. Okay, so on this part, I used the alpha in a different way, and it used the technique that Orb has on his ArtStation. And so I'll show you that real quick. Let's go back on over to Photoshop, and then this is the map that was created for this. I'm gonna just recreate this real quick. I'm gonna go File, New, and then my background color is white, and we got a resolution of 500 by 500. If you wanted to do something like 512 by 512, that's more standard game texture resolution. If you want to go higher, you can go 1024 by 1024. Let's hit create for that, and then I'm gonna make a new layer right here, and I'll call this symbol. The name of that layer doesn't really matter. At this point, I'll put it on the marquee tool of the ellipse tool, and I can click and drag out. And if I hold down Shift and then Alt, I can drag from the middle. So if you want to do that, once it's made, you can push and pull it around. You can see how it's going to tell you if you're snapping to the center. I'm going to fill with the, this is the foreground color, so I can hit Alt backspace for that, just like that. And if I want to drag another sphere out, I can do this. Again, if I do Shift, it's going to do a perfect sphere. If I do Alt and Shift, it'll drag out from the center. And I can push and pull that thing around. I'm just going to push this right up in here and then hit backspace. Now it's going to delete that part out because we've got this on a layer all by itself. And then at that point, I can just add another sphere. I'll just click and drag right here, hit Alt backspace for that, and then maybe do another sphere here, hit Alt backspace, and then drag this over here and hit Alt backspace. Okay, so that sets up the symbol that we have for this. And what I have noticed, I've tried this technique on this complex design, and it doesn't work quite the same. It works a bit better if this is kind of in this square format like this, and then your design is a bit more simple. So we're going to go right here, right click, and say go to blending options. And under blending options, we can do an inner glow, and we can tell it to be a blend mode of screen. We'll take the opacity, we'll drag it up to 100%. This technique, instead of softer, we'll put it on precise. And instead of source center, we'll go ahead and say edge for this. and that will push out from the edge. Then we do have choke, which is set to 0. And then if you do the size, you can push this until it gets to this point where it kind of meets right in the middle there. Now you can play around with range. If you want to pull that up just a little bit, you can. Maybe I'll just leave it right there, maybe at 52, and hit OK. And then we can save that out. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-S to do a save as. I'm going to save it on my computer. And then I've already got a version 1. I'll just save it as version 2 so we can pull this into Zbrush. I'll hit OK for that. And then let's go hop on over to Zbrush. And then this time, let's go to the alpha area. We'll go ahead and say import. And we'll do this Moon version 2 Photoshop document. I'm going to go on this side. I don't want it to push all the way through, so I'm going to have backface masking on. Now, if we just drag out immediately, get this focal shift all the way down to 0 again. If we drag out like that, this mid value is set to 0. Let's put this at 100, and then click and then drag out. And I'm going to take my intensity and put it all the way to 100. So that's really, really intense. Let's drag this thing down just a little bit within through here. And you can see what I'm getting. I'm getting something a bit more what I would expect. So I'm going to try to center this circle part right here. And I might have to do a couple of iterations of it to get it exactly where I want it to be. Now we can leave it there if we want. If this is a little bit too rough, you can always take a mask, hold down Control, and then paint on this particular area. And then we'll hold down Control, click once to invert it, and then I'll hold down Control to smooth that out, and we could hit clay polish and maybe polish that up. Now the problem is it's affecting the other detail that I've done on there. So if we do this at the tail end, this could be problematic. One thing we could do is kind of go back to our brushes. I'd have to find the orb brush set and maybe go to this cracks 3 and then maybe redraw a few of my elements that I've got on there. I'm going to make my brush size a little bit smaller. So maybe I'm just going back through and re-hitting some of this detail that we have on there. So you will find if you don't do this in the correct order, you may have to resculpt some of the details that you've made before in the past. So sometimes that becomes a little bit frustrating, but sometimes it can produce some pretty interesting and unexpected results that maybe you just weren't thinking were going to happen, and you do get some happy accidents that way. We can always go back with Trim Dynamic and then maybe hit some of these edges along here and just chip that up a little bit just to make it not look so perfect from the stamp that we had created before. Okay, so that should give you quite a few different techniques to mess around with and kind of play around with to add some extra detail into your sculpt and get some really ornate kind of details put into your design.